Yes, all right. Welcome everybody. We're here again at the Frontend Lightning Talks with lots of people and lots of enjoyment as well. I already saw in the chat some people talking about memes. Yes, there will be plenty of memes. Today is an informal session, but also some great experience from our fellow developers. We are here at Backend and Frontend. But first, before we start, we will do some general notations actually. Questions can be put in the chat. At the end, there's a possibility to unmute yourself and join the discussion as well. This session will be recorded and posted on YouTube. The text not, so you can just freely put in there whatever you want. And for us, it's mostly about enjoying ourselves. And I will introduce myself right now. I'm Christian, the host of today, the regular host for Frontend. I work at Society. I've worked for multiple clients like ING and Aegon. And today, I'm not alone, actually, which is pretty nice for the backend side. We have Abel as well.
I'm Abel. I'm 27 years old. Work for Society as a Java developer, and my client is ING. Also do some cybersecurity work there. I also help host the annual Silk Code event for Society, and I help organize the bi-weekly Java Fridays for the Java community. And today I come equipped with a slightly red eye, but my vision is still sharp, so won't hurt.
And jokes as well, so we'll be fine.
We'll see.
We will see.
Yeah, that's all.
Exactly. So for the Frontend Lightning Talks, we like to inspire people. It's an informal show. Today we have a different show, a talk show. But next time we will be back with content presentations, so deep diving innovation, innovative technology as well. But we are from Society. I will not do like a recruitment pitch. That's not who we are. We are all developers. We don't like that. We have enough recruiters on our LinkedIn, actually. But I just want to mention we like community here at Society. We do all kinds of different things. It's really nice to work with each other and do this as well. Here you see a few of our clients, and we make technology work, as we say here at Society. But without further ado, let's get to the program.
So obviously what you're experiencing right now is the welcome speech. Afterwards, we'll give you a quick introduction of the topic. Of course, we're going to be discussing front-end versus back-end. There are some stereotypes around the differences between the two. We'll address those. And then we're going to address a number of statements that we're going to make. We're going to ask our experts here to give comments on those statements, give their opinions, and share their experience, because they're all very experienced experts. That's why they're here. And then around 8 o'clock, we will be finishing up this session.
Yes, exactly. So if you're thinking, I have a burning question, like something about full stack or something else, you have the right to type in the chat your question, and we will hopefully discuss it with the people in here. And maybe in the end, you can join the discussion yourself. But before we start, we're going to talk about, well, developers, of course, backend X frontend, and X is also versus, but mostly working together. We will do kind of a small sketch talking about stereotypes, because when we think about backend, I'm a frontender, I think of a few things. This is a bit exaggerated, so don't feel offended, please. It's just for fun, and also to try to get in the mood and see how we can connect with each other, because we mostly do the work together. So when I'm thinking about the backender as a frontender, I usually think about people who are gaming in their parents' basement, wearing something like black. Mostly antisocial, but also very precise and structured, and usually very honest in what they want. But it needs to be their way. In my experience, it's been really cool to work with, but also sometimes really annoying. They're most of the times very genius, but also a bit lazy. That's for the stereotypes of the backenders, I think.
Yeah, well, we backenders have a slightly different view on frontenders.
I expect as much, yeah.
Usually you sit at Starbucks wearing a lumberjack shirt, eating avocado on toast, having a very neat beard, working on a MacBook, and yeah, you pretend to know a lot more than you really do in our experience.
Well, working on a MacBook is check here, so I will not say anything about that as well. There's like stereotypes of backenders and frontenders. We also want to crush them, right? Because
the stereotypes.
Yeah, the stereotypes. Yeah, of course. Not the people here, of course. We want to see how we work together. And talking about people here, let's give some introductions. On the left side, we have the backend side, and Maarten is here. So Maarten, please introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Maarten Diederik. I'm 31 years old. I've been active as a software engineer for 10 years, both in a freelance capacity and now as a full-time contractor at Society. I've worked at a large variety of clients, both big and small, such as the University of Applied Sciences of Utrecht. And currently I'm working at Arval.
Yeah, great. That's first one of the backenders. Great to have you here, Maarten, at the show.
Oh, great to be
and
here.
I'm already looking forward to your experiences as well.
Yeah.
Willem.
Yeah, my name is Willem Hustings. I'm 34 years old. I'm currently working at Society as an expert backend developer. I'm working here for more than 7 years already at multiple clients. Portbase, Dictu, that's part of the Ministry of Economic Affairs, KPN, Alphabet, and currently at Arval. I'm working on an assignment.
That's usually.
Yes.
Nice. Looking forward to it.
Get to know the first of our front-enders, Suhas.
Hey, hi. My name is Suhas Sanmok. I'm 34 years old. Yeah, I always miss the counting. And I'm a front-end developer. I have been doing that for like 12 years. And I have worked in e-learning domain. After that, I worked in e-commerce. And recently, I'm working from Society for the ING Bank, so financial domain. Yeah, that's pretty much about it.
And finally, Bas.
I'm Bas Brouwer. I'm from Amsterdam, 32 years old. I've been front-ender for the last couple of years. I've been working for different clients like Annexis and the last couple of years for ASML.
Nice. Great, Bas. Thank you. I think we can go to our first statement, actually, right?
I think we can. So
The
let's do that.
participants, the warriors of Frontend and Backend are now present. So let's open the gladiator.
We've met our contenders.
We've met our contenders, exactly.
So obviously, when you create a feature, you need to work together. But how should front-enders and back-enders work together when doing so? So let's say, Suhas,
Okay.
do you have anything to comment on this?
Yeah, I mean, there are various ways of doing that, but I think the best way is the front-enders and back-enders should always have the first discussion together so that they have one known way of doing things. They are on the same page and they know what now they are going to do, because after like 2 months, when everyone is done with that, they can come back and say, okay, this is what we decided and this is what we have came for. So that's the best way of collaborating, because it could happen that the backenders go in their way. If they are in a separate team, they have their own architecture and structure, and frontenders always think like, yeah, if I'm going to do that, I must have that data. So they just assume, yeah, I have data, and they go ahead with that. And after 3 months, they're like, no, you can't get that data. You have to call 5 APIs for that. And I was like, okay, maybe I'll write an adapter or something. So yeah, that's not a good way of working. So at least the first meeting about any feature should be together, and then they're on the same page, and then they can develop better solutions, I would say. That's my experience.
I saw Maarten nodding.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree. But also in the sense that I think that front-enders and back-enders should be part of the same team for most of the development of a feature. Because even if you have the first meeting together, if you go your separate ways after that, there can still be different takes on implementing features. Like what you said, the backend has a certain idea of, hey, this is the data we have, these are the endpoints we're developing, we're perfect, right? And then you get the front end to integrate it, and it just doesn't work at all. It's totally not intuitive.
Yeah, I think on what you're saying, the most important thing on this part is the communication between the front and the backenders, because you can put them in one team or you can put them in separate teams. It still depends on the communication, because if you have a finding as a front ender, then you should go and talk to your backenders and vice versa. Because I've been at the assignment before where there were 2 different teams and they only spoke to each other once a week. So if you find a bug on the first day, you have to wait an entire week until that meeting is to come up with a solution for it. So, and you always have to come up with a solution together where everybody agrees on. So communicate with each other, and if you find something, just go to each other and talk to each other so you can find a solution. So in my opinion, it's best to basically sit next to each other and start building the feature together.
Have you experienced those problems that Willem just described as well, Bas?
Yes, we often just try with our teams. We try to have a good communication between the front end and back end, have a good handshake on how the API will look like and how you will use the API. That is to the both teams themselves, but the structure of the communication between the two teams has been determined before the teams start working. And if there are some small changes in that, then that will be communicated again. And there's to go again for a new approval to see how that new approach will look like.
Yeah.
All right. I think for this statement, that's some very nice answers there. Thank you.
Yeah,
Let's move on.
Yeah, to summarize, indeed, communication is key, basically, when working
Yes.
together. Don't work on islands.
And stay close.
And
in-
stay
within,
close.
within one team. preferably.
Yeah, exactly. But when you're staying close with one team, you also maybe have some annoyances, maybe some things you want to change about each other, talking about stereotypes, of course. So name one aspect you want to change about backenders. And people in the chat, you can also put it there like something you want to change. Be wary, backenders. You can already think about it because the next statement will be frontenders. So feel free to defend yourself as well. So join in the chat and say what you want to change possibly. But in here, I'm going to Bas. What's one aspect you've encountered that you really want to change about backenders?
It's person per person for this statement, but having backenders also test the front end feature. So having backenders also test the front end interaction to see if it completely works as intended. Not only that the call works, but also trying different things out in the front end with that specific feature to see if you can break it in another way than we have been clicking on it for the last week. 2 million times. And then you start getting into a pattern, and then when someone else looks at it again, he knows what's supposed to be happening, and then they will find always new ways to possibly have an edge case that hasn't been thought of before.
Okay, so don't only look at the status code, also look at the screens itself.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not
Great.
just the postman.
Exactly. So do you have one aspect you want to change about backenders?
Yeah. Yeah, like it kind of aligns with the
where
point,
to
yeah.
start?
Where to start? Yeah.
Because yeah, when they actually try it from the front end, they get what we are trying to do. And sometimes when we are discussing on technical level, they say, okay, for this you have to call this API, for this you have to call this API, because they are like totally different databases, and then they are different APIs, they're not our team. But then when they actually use the application, they might come up with some ideas like, yeah, if you're taking too much effort just to get that data, maybe I can combine two API and give you data in one, and you can just go ahead. You don't have to wait for 3 button clicks to go to that page and get that data. So I have seen that happening. So yeah, I think they should at least see how the front end is working, and then they can also come up with the better ideas to giving us data, or maybe authentication, authorization, like lots of things that they have come up with, like, yeah, why are you doing like that? It's easier. Maybe you should just do it something like that. So yeah, that will actually help. I would also like to share, and in my team, people do that. So everyone that just runs the application and tests it. And yeah, sometimes they even make, yeah, that's stupid. Why are you doing that? But when we explain it to them from the front end side, oh yeah, then it's needed. So they agree to it. So at no point they are like, yeah, I don't know what those guys are doing. Yeah, it should not be.
Yeah,
So
communication is key
yeah.
again as well.
Yeah, they should try to use the front end. Not develop, but at least use, so that they get some better ideas.
Is there already any reactions from the backend side on these comments? Do you guys see yourself in that, or maybe?
Yeah, and I definitely agree on the problem, but I think I've noticed this also, things you will mention also with front enders, that they will do, yeah, my front end is finished, but your API doesn't work. And then, like what you said, basically the same old words, but communication is key. You should work together and then come up with a good solution. So you always encounter, you refine the story, and then you're going to start building it. You always encounter a problem, and then you have to come together and communicate with each other what the best solution is. And not most of the time, some people think, oh, I mean, let's make an assumption that this is the best solution, and that doesn't work. So please don't make assumptions, and talk to each other and to your product owner about to make the best solution as a team and not as a front ender or as a back ender.
I think that's really nice that you mentioned it, because in the chat, Martijn Kramer also mentions, like, all right, talking about working together with front and the back end, the business is also involved in there. So how does it look like when creating a feature, actually? So that's what the question was from last statement. Oop, let's go back. When creating a feature, the business is also involved. Is it more back-end orientated in that case, or more front-end orientated? That's also really important when you work together with the business.
Yeah, but it's not only the business, it's also most of the times you have a tester on board in your team. So it's not only a front end and back end, but it's indeed ook the business and testers and
the whole organization.
Yeah.
the whole organization. And you also always have a pipeline where, yeah. So it's more than only back end and front end, but yeah, communication is key.
Yeah, exactly. And Gerben also in the chat mentions when he wants to work, he wants to have the backend ready first, and then the front end after that. What's your opinion about that? Maybe the front enders can relate, Bas?
As soon as it depends a little bit how you work. If you first try to make a contract together on how the API will look like, and you don't have yet the backend, but you have a structure for how the API response will be and what you will have as a body for the API, then you can already, at least in most of our use cases, we have a mock server, so we don't always need a backend. So we can create our own data, or we ask for the backend a small data example, and then we use that in a mock server, and then we can start developing.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then we can work together at the same time, and at the end we can create our own images, combine them on a test cluster, and then see if it works as intended.
Oh, sounds great. I think we should go to the next statement, maybe. Or do you have one last word?
Yeah, what I've noticed on working on in front the back end in front of the front end. It's also weird because I've noticed in the past at some clients that if we've built the API, then the front end is going to start working with that API, and then they request little changes. So this API should be a bit different here. We should add a field or something like that, and then at the end, it's finished at the same time as they are finished because they ask for change all the time. So I think it's better to build up the story at the same time in parallel.
Maarten, one last.
No, I agree on that. Yeah, it's exactly the point I wanted to make.
You've been in the same situation, right?
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's one nice for our as well. You can go ahead.
I mean, we've now talked about what backenders should be doing differently. Of course, there is a different side to this question. Dear backenders, what do you think frontenders should do differently in particular? Maarten?
Well, one thing I want front-enders to take into account, sometimes this might be a little spicy take, but sometimes we make a backend not just for your front end. Sometimes it's agnostic. And when you consume an API and you say, well, these endpoints it would be much easier if these were combined into a single one, or well, this does not really gel with the user experience, then you should take into account that it's not just for you. We're not just accommodating one single front end. Sometimes we are accommodating multiple different backend services and or completely different front ends with completely different user experiences. And yeah, that's one point I would like to take.
One of the many.
I could go on.
Indeed, I totally agree with you, because as in finance domain, I actually observed that, because when we request them, like, why do you need 3 or 4 flags? You know the requirement, you know what data to send. So why do we need to send, 4 extra flags to be 1 true, 2, 1 false, and all that? And then they said, yeah, this is not the API just you're going to use. It's going to be used all over the domain. And some teams only want this data. And to some team, we are told not to pass that data. So we need to make sure who is calling us. And that's why we need all those flags, we have to call like 4 or 5 services. So I totally agree with you. And I have that vision now that I cannot just request, yeah, can you just add one more field to it? You know,
Yeah.
just fetch it from there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah,
agree with you.
Yep.
Yeah, that's,
Willem, anything to add also?
yeah, a lot, but no, just kidding. No, I work with great frontenders and also with some people that are less great. Yeah, it was always nice working with them. It's most of the time I can put the blame on the frontenders, but I think when I look deep inside my heart, we as backenders could also make the same mistakes, and like we're all watching our own piece of code that's the truth and that's the only truth. And I think we should sometimes expand our vision and look at the broader picture and not only at your own piece of code, and so see it as a whole project, or yeah, you're only one gear in the larger machine. So basically, yeah, I can blame frontenders for a lot of things, but but most of the time I do the same, make the same mistakes as well. So I think, yeah, it wouldn't be fair.
Yeah, we all make mistakes sometimes.
Yeah.
Of course. Often.
Most of them they're made by frontenders.
Let's just not go there, guys. The Frontend Lighting Talk.
No, just kidding.
Yeah, just kidding, of course.
Bas, have you got anything to add?
I think, or maybe not much as a counter stuff, but more of a joining the backend now for a second.
More than welcome.
Yeah.
That it would be helpful sometimes, or maybe it's a bit in the middle, that backenders also explain what is happening over in their service, because we just think, oh, you just make a call to
Database, yeah.
database and you can fetch our data, even though you're talking to 7 different services to get those 3 items together. And yeah, to have that explanation also can make debugging easier. If you're running against problems inside the application, then you can know where.
Yeah, and also as a
From what
person,
services.
it's really understanding, right? As a frontend, then you're all right. It's fine if it doesn't come right now, but please let's talk about it.
Yeah, I've experienced those kind of situations because I've made a call to an endpoint that fetches data from like 3 or 4 different services. Then they all fetch their data from other services. So it was it took a long time to complete that call, and the front end was, couldn't you speed it up? No, because there were a lot of calls behind that one endpoint, so I couldn't speed it up. And it was like, once I explained to the front ender why it took so long, it was like, okay, now I get it. And then you get again, communication is key, and then you get some mutual understanding of each other's work, and it's always good.
Communication is key, once again.
Yes.
And, forgive each other's mistakes, because we all make them. I guess that's a good takeaway for this one.
I think that's a nice comment from Martijn.
We do have a question. I would love to see more transparency. What is test in the front end? Often I hear it's too much effort to test. While in the end it helps us a lot.
So that's about testing in the front end and testing in the back end as well. So
what's the question?
Maybe you can elaborate. Yes.
Maybe you can elaborate a bit more. Feel free to elaborate.
Unmute or maybe add.
Well, unmute is not an option right now. Maybe in the end, that's possible. Feel free to add, and then we can come back to you, of course. We also have a statement about testing and mock data as well coming to you. So maybe that will answer your question. Let's go to the next one. Well, this can be a spicy one for the backenders and the frontenders as well. Can Node.js replace the entire backend? If so, can a front-end developer be a backend developer? And I'm a little bit scared to ask this, but first let's go to Suhas. What are your opinions about this?
Yeah, I mean, what I have heard about Node.js, I'm not a Node.js developer. I'm a Node.js user because we use it for mock server and running the local host and everything. So, but I have seen that everything that Java does, Node can do, but not necessary, because I have heard from experienced Java developers that In financial domain, you need to do complex mathematical calculations. And for that, JavaScript is not a good language. And you know why, right? we have those all jokes and tips and tricks about JavaScript. So yeah, for those complex calculations, there are some also in some scientific calculations, JavaScript is not good because you have to really calculate fraction of point. You have to apply some formulas. So yeah, that's the one thing that I know that Node.js cannot do. But yeah, please enlighten if you think that yeah, Java is superior to Node.js in many other aspects.
Yeah, Martin, what do you think about it?
Well,
Yeah.
I do have experience
Yeah.
with Node.js. I actually started out as a JavaScript developer on Frontend for a couple of years. Then I transitioned as a backend developer to Node.js because I became very unhappy being a frontend developer. No.
That's controversial.
Also the other way around, you.
Yeah.
Going to frontend, the frontend going to backend.
But the thing I have with JavaScript is it's a multi-paradigm language, and that's a strength. But it's especially in the backend can be a weakness because if you collaborate with multiple people on a single project, you will see that those people have different styles. And if you can solve a lot of this by, for example, using TypeScript with strict linting and rules. But to answer the question, can a frontender be a backender? Because that's the real question. I mean, Node.js can replace a backend. I personally wouldn't. I prefer Java because it's much more rigid, to put it that way. But it's a completely different mindset. A frontender spends his time consuming data and using it to present it to a user in an efficient way, and then send that data back, talk to the backend. And a backend, well, also consumes data, but does that in a far more regulated way. Often security often is far more an issue than it is on the front end. It's an issue, but you have a lot more rules. So yeah, I'd say it's a different mindset.
Different mindset. Great. Different mindset. Yeah, could be. And there's also a really nice comment in the chat actually. When you write in Node.js, let me phrase it actually. If you do Node as backend, you are a backender. So I guess that answers the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it can be so simple.
It can be so simple. Yeah, exactly. Well, that's great, Diederik. Nice comment there actually. Martijn also gave some extra context. So what he means is often here's a project that testing in the front end is hard, for front end testing, and I wanted transparency, what is tested and how. Do you experience that testing is hard in the front end, Bas? Maybe you can elaborate.
Testing itself is not that hard, but you can make life a lot easier by making good test helpers. So for example, if you have different teams that work on the front end, you have a team that specializes in making components for the whole company. If they make a test harness or test helper for their component, so that you don't have to interact with the component, you only have to select the component and then ask that test helper to execute what you want to do. If you create those things, then testing becomes a lot easier. Also, when the component team decides to completely overhaul their component, your test won't fail because your harness will cover that change, and you don't have to modify any of your tests, because if you update your package of those components, the test helpers will also update and your tests will still pass because everything still stays the same. Although the common component behind in the code has been completely rearranged and changed.
Yeah, so a tip is look at your test helpers as a front end, look what is possible while making some things generic as well. So you don't have like 6,000 unit tests, for instance. And code coverage, what do you think about that?
Code coverage is a bit of a 50-50 topic, especially in the front end, because you can have 100% coverage, but you can still only have 50% of the use cases tested.
I see she was nodding really
Yeah.
on. You have
Because if you logically think that, it could happen, because when you're thinking about the component, you say I pass this data, I get this data, but there are scenarios where some data is missing or it's malformed and you never test that. Or even like if your component is so complex that when you try to cover it, you just want to make sure that it goes inside every if and else. But what if it needs to go first two ifs and then the last else, and that then what happens? So all those scenarios they're not checked in the coverage. So of course, what he says that use cases are not covered, only the coverage that it reached till that point. So of course, testing, but it's not hard. It's you just have to be creative. Like you have to think about what the most user is gonna do with the application, and then your test should be designed in that way.
And I think the more you do it, the more fun it becomes. And the more you do it, I've found many times bugs in my code because I tested different use cases and then I suddenly saw, oh, I haven't covered this use case yet. And then you find in that way new bugs.
Yeah, so writing relevant front-end tests is really important. Chris also mentioned that in the chat. What's your last?
Because if the test runner runs over your code but doesn't assert anything, it's still counted as covered.
Yeah, but I think most of those things what you say are the same for front-end and back-end, because you can write in the back-end as well, you can write tests that doesn't do anything but work for the code coverage. So it's all about the quality of the test.
Quality of the test, exactly. I think we can continue to our next statement, right, Abel?
I think we can, yes. So let's do that. This is a spicy question as well. Do you believe in the concept of full stack?
Concept.
Suhas.
Oh my God, I'm target here. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, concept-wise, yeah, of course, conceptually it's possible, they say. But I have been a front-end developer for like 12 years now, and I still can honestly say I don't understand JavaScript completely. There are still new scenarios I find in JavaScript. Okay, it works that way. So I would say that if you want to become a full-stack never fully understand Java, never fully understand JavaScript. So you will have jack of both ends. So if you want to develop an application, you will develop it, but it will not be an optimized application. When you have a backend and front end, they make sure that whatever they're doing is optimized. It is using the latest technology. It's using all the known bugs, and that they're removed from it. So yeah, full stack developer is a thing, but in most of the cases, from my personal experience, what I have seen, a full stack developer is a good backend developer. We just know a little bit about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, that he can create a page, a button.
Yeah, just enough of the front end indeed. Yeah.
That's my personal experience.
No, I've had that personal experience as well. That I think there are people who can do both, but not on the level of a total dedicated person on one topic. So on that I agree, and I think the world is changing. The world we live in as a developer is changing really fast. Only for Java already, there like every month there are new things to explore and new libraries and new updates. Yeah.
Same with JavaScript.
And with JavaScript and Angular and all the front end tools, it's the same. So keep up with both worlds. It's almost impossible. So yeah, I think what you said, most of the time you have developers that are good at backend and do little bit of front end, and they know just enough to do something in there. Yeah, that's a concept I see as a full stack developer. But yeah, expert on both parts. I don't think so.
No.
Is there also an upside to having full stack developers?
Yeah. Yes. Sorry.
No.
Hey, go ahead, Martin.
Well, I think it's very beneficial for either party to have some experience with the other side, for front-enders to know how the backend works, to at least have a grasp on what REST is, HTTP codes, so they can handle them properly, and what generally happens on the backend. So it also creates some understanding of what you said. You're just making a call to the database, fetching it, it's easy, why isn't it that fast? Well, creates understanding. And for backenders as well, that front-end isn't easy. It's often very complicated to make a few work properly. A lot of optimization goes into that, and I think it's very beneficial for both sides to have an understanding of that. But no, you will never be an expert in both.
No. I agree. Yeah, it can be beneficial indeed, because I've done some simple front end work as well, because I was in a team with a front ender, and there was a lot of front end work on our backlog. So yeah, we need to help him. And so I could do the simple work. He did the hard front end stuff. So we speed up the process of the front end. So yeah, we managed to make it until the sprint, and we also finished all the stories before, on time. So that was a good thing. So I think we can help each other by doing some simple stuff, but the stuff he did, I was not able to.
I think it's also depends a lot on the company size, because I think smaller companies can benefit more from, well, it depends also the use case. It can benefit a bit more from full stack developers, and big companies where each millisecond of processing time matters, then you most often just go into a very specialized people that would specialize very much in one department.
It's also the size of the application.
Yeah.
Because if it gets bigger, it gets more complex.
Do you also see the other way around, that front-enders start doing more back-end work? Because so far we've talked about the opposite.
Never really seen that.
I've seen one, yes.
Yeah.
They exist.
Oh.
They exist, yeah. There was not enough front-end work, so he was like, maybe I can help you, but I don't have any experience in Java. So we were like, okay, we can help you with that. And we explained some things, and he started to do more and more backend work at our team. So and he really enjoyed. And at the end, he actually became a Java developer. So.
Well, that's a great example of learning mentality, right?
Yeah.
It's also within, we're all developers, so we need to learn every day, basically.
Yeah, I want to do some new things, and then he started to do some Java code, and he enjoyed it. So he started to learn more, and also in his free time, he started to learn, and that was really enjoyed helping him with that.
Because I had totally different experience. Was I wanted to help a backender in my team, and I told her, okay, please just do the setup for me, and I'll try to do. And we were trying for the whole day, but we couldn't do the setup. There was some certificates error, there was some Java library errors. And at the end of the day, he said, you know what? You're good at front end. Keep it to that. I will be more productive if I'm working rather than setting it for someone else. So and that's the reason I'm a front end developer, because when I was doing my engineering, first Java program I did was just do a console log, or how do you do it?
The hello world.
Print line.
Hello world, and even that didn't work. And then I created an HTML page with a simple JavaScript, and it just rendered. So I was like, this is what I want to do. And that's how I became front-end developer.
So what if the backend language for your company is actually Node.js? Asks Vincent. Does that change things?
In what way?
Well, in being a full stack developer.
No.
No?
No, different set of skills. I mean, you can use a hammer to hammer a nail into a shed and mesh someone's skull in. And I say both require a very different skill set.
It might be easier.
No.
It might be easier indeed to switch.
Yeah, or to help for one day on some simple tasks to get the backlog a little bit lower.
But I think for the big complex projects like we discussed before, Node.js isn't the best solution. So I think, and if you have a small project, I think it's possible to do both. But on big projects, it's not.
Yeah, I see there's a lot going on in the chat. Just keep on chatting with each other and discussing as well, because we're having a discussion. But meanwhile, in the chat, people are also enjoying themselves. Please continue to do so as well. If we spot a question, maybe tag myself so we can spot that easily. It would be nice if you really want to your question mentioned.
Yes, and for now, I think we can agree that full stack, you're not going to be an expert in both parts of the field, but they can be really beneficial to have around. I think that's a good takeaway to move on to the next one.
Yes, I think so as well. Well, this is a very interesting one. Is a front-end or back-end leading for the application? So when thinking about schemas, etc., thinking about the way to go for the application, who should be in the lead? Actually, Maarten, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, no. Like
No.
Sorry.
Next one.
Stop word. No. I think, like I said before, that the backend is often developed as a agnostic of the front end. So in a lot of cases, enterprise cases, I think the backend should be leading for the application. The business logic should exist on the backend the backend application, and the business rules, and That's what I believe. I think that's logical. So that's not just one front end can actually use it. It's widely accessible.
Have you been in a situation where the front end is leading?
Yes.
All right.
No, yes.
Good?
No, that was at the very start of my career, and I was working at a small tech company, and the level of experience from our seniors at the time in terms of web development wasn't great. They came from other areas, and they wanted to. There was money to be made in web development, and that's what we were going to do. And they looked at the front end, and well, that's where the application is. That's where most of the business logic should exist, and the back end's just a place where we fetch data to and from the database. And then came the time to actually connect, make different front ends, and change the application for specific clients, give them specific front ends, and we had to do it all over again. So yeah, that was not great. That kind of sucked.
Sounds like a security issue.
Well, a lot of security did exist on the back end, but the business logic, not really. Yeah, it was more like a pass-through thing with a login and authentication. Yeah,
And
Well,
what,
it was not great. Like I said, beginning of my career.
Both of you have experienced something related to front end and back end leading an application?
we when you have a microservice system, then recently it came up a little bit that you have a backend that works for your front end. So you have very agnostic services in the backend running, and then you have your front end as a microservice, and connected to that front end, you have a backend, and it's called BFF, backend for front end. And then front end becomes more leading, because then that specific backend only works, well, not fully leading, but then it becomes easier to make specific API calls for that front end, because they can take different API calls, combine them in their backend, and then send it specifically for the front end.
Can you call that the backend then? Or is the backend the large ecosystem of microservices? And that's just your anchor into that backend? Kind of. Yeah.
No, it depends what you call them. But
Yeah, okay. That's more of a what
What's
you call
life?
Yeah, yeah.
You have a front end and a back end and something in between.
Yeah. Well,
How should you call it?
it's more of an adapter at that point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Willem, have you any experience in this field about front end or back end leading the application?
I've seen it both, and yeah, I can agree on with what Martin said. That yeah, most of the time it also depends on the architecture, and I think there are things to say for both. But yeah, on a large scale application, as what I'm used to work on is that backend is leading.
Who else? Any
I
recommendation?
have one weird experience in that because I have seen where it works. The front end was leading, but it was in e-learning. So they have a content management system, and from front end we can directly interact with the CMS. We can pass the attributes and ask for specific data, and it will return it to it. So there was no actual backend there. It was just a CMS that we can interact with the front end, and then the entire team was of front end developers and testers. That's it. So we used to design how we want the content. We could fetch specific questions for specific students and universities. It was a e-learning, complete a big application. So there was actually no backend, and that at that point I actually thought, yeah, there could be a scenario where backend is not needed. But then it was, of course, that system was think thoroughly and developed for like 4 or 5 years, that they made sure that everything that front end need, they can just query and get it, so that there is no need for backend. So it could happen in e-learning. But yeah, on other domains, I highly doubt.
But that was a small application. I think for small applications, you don't specifically need a backend. But yeah, once they grow and they become even bigger, you want to store things on a structured way and do things in a structured way, and then then there is more need for a backend. Yeah.
Scalability also important indeed. So looking per use case, what's needed, I guess. That's something that also came back a lot. Like communication is key. Use cases, big companies, small companies.
Yeah, if you have like a small application, like a website with with something for a small company, then yeah, just make a website and you don't have to do a specific website. And if there's some data stored, the front end can manage to put that in the database and retrieve it. And you don't need a specific API in between there. But yeah, once the application grows and grows and you have multiple, like thousands of page requests, then I think there is a need for a backend.
Great. Thank you. Thank you all for this session. We're also looking at you back home. Because the camera for us, but you back home behind your screen. We have an option for yourself to think about statements that you can discuss and also join in the discussion as well. So we'll do one statement, and after that we will give the floor to you and see if people want to have some questions or want to put like a spicy statement again. But then you can join in the discussion not via chat, but via the microphone as well. That would be really cool. So think about it. If there are no statements, we will just continue our regular program. But this is really an opportunity for you back home. All right. First, we'll do this statement again. Another statement, exactly.
Let's do that. Well, we already discussed this before, testing, but for testing you need some mock data to work with. Who should create it? Backend or frontend? Dylan.
Yeah, depends on the case, but and depends on the size of the data structure you're trying to mock. But yeah, currently I'm in a project that mocks in the backend some calls and also mocks in the front end. So the backend mocks the data it retrieves from the front end, and the front end mocks the data that it retrieves from the backend. So basically both.
You say it depends on the size of the data structure?
Yeah, I can imagine if you have very complex data structure and things, that you could decide to do something else. But yeah, ideal, it's not ideal, I guess, because you want to test it, and when with mock data, you know which data you're supposed to get and what the supposed outcome should be.
Suhas, any thoughts on that?
I agree with him, but I have seen lots of cases where even the backender is not sure what data they're going to get. I know that's a very rare scenario because he has to fetch data from 10 different services and he's not sure what's the compulsory fields that he always going to receive. So in that scenario, what he did was he gave a list of all the attributes. He said, yeah, just tell me which ones are really compulsory for you for the front end. And then we were like, okay, this and this we at least need, and this one we can still handle in the front end. So at that time, they actually gave us a JSON that this is the JSON you should be receiving.
I think you have another problem there because you aren't in control of your data anymore.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. So that was this one scenario where we actually expected every time there was a change, we were like, yeah, please send us a new JSON. and we will see if the attribute changes or everything. But yeah, but it was like 7 years ago, so I assume things are now better. You already know what data you'll be receiving from each service and the contracts.
Experienced something similar because I needed to mock some data and I don't know what to expect. So what I actually did is requesting to the service to see what data I retrieved, and the data that JSON I put in and changed some names and numbers, and then I've got my mock data.
Yeah, sometimes when frontend is not sure what they're gonna get and how they're gonna get it, it's always better that the backenders who already know what kind of data they're receiving just create a mock JSON, put an ABC, no problem. We just want to know what are the attributes names so that we can code. Because when frontend breaks, it does not tell you where it breaks. So that's the common problem. If we are like fetching 10 values from there, if it fails on the third, we will never know. We have to put console logs to see on what value it failed.
Use a debugger.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, it's like Bas said earlier, right? It's very important to create contracts, and I believe that the person just developing the API and developing the backend system should decide what the data structure looks like to make it function, but also that they're responsible to communicate that clearly to the front-end developer so that it's clear what kind of data structures are being used. Yeah.
I think it also depends very much where you want to use the mock data. Mock data from API calls often I think the backend creates that for the front end. But if you have an internal component that needs data, or internal component in your front end that works with certain data, then often you create that data yourself because backend doesn't know what you're doing in that specific component.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very much thinking from a backend perspective here, but yeah, that makes sense.
That's what as a backend.
Yeah, but it's also again communication, what fields you need, and yeah. Stick to my point. Communication is key.
Keep
That's
coming
the
back to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking in circles. And coming back and back again. Yeah.
Communication is key. On that note, shall we move on to the spicy statement submitted by one of the viewers?
Yeah, I think Martijn mentioned something. Do it as the API interface or all the data structures in the front end or backend. I think it's a statement we can discuss, and maybe Martijn, I will try and unmute yourself. Let's see if that's possible. Give me a few seconds, of course, and then you can also mention what you mean and maybe start a discussion as well. So give me a few seconds for this. All right, I think it's possible to unmute yourself, Martijn, and maybe you can repeat the statement and
Okay,
also what you
so-
want to know from us.
Okay, so if we're talking about contracting, doing interfaces, we have an API interface and a data structure interface. And a data structure, it has effect on user guidance and in the front end, but in the back end, it has impact on our business rules. What part of what you test in your interfacing between two systems do you invest time and effort in? Because as we all know, 100% test coverage is, well, a nice goal, but not the main goal. So what would the approach is? I know from a backend perspective, because I'm a backender myself, I try to mostly, okay, the base interface and all the most important business flows. But in the front end, it has also to do with user guidance, how to give hints, do a hint prompt, hit ups, all that kind of. So what's their approach?
Yeah, so I will try to summarize the question a bit for the people here as well. I think it has to do in the front end, you also have the user thinking about, all right, we are related to the user, so we need to think about what data does the user need to see at that moment. And for the backend side, it's all about, well, what data do we have and what can we have on the server side, if I pronounce it a bit correctly. So the question from you, Martijn, would be basically for the front end, how do you manage it? For the back end, what's possible for the front end? It's possible.
Yeah, exactly.
And how do you test it?
And how do you test it?
But
Yeah,
more
of course.
test what the response from the backend is for the front end on how to test that or on how to.
No. So in front end, we have way more aspects of the user guidance. Like you cannot submit a minus number, for example, in a business flow. Those things are part of your internal API structures in a way in your molecules and stuff like that. And the question is like for backend, it's just I just need to validate against the business rules. It fits and it doesn't fit. Period. That's the two major paths we have. Where
There's no user testing in the backend.
Yeah,
Okay.
and you have the user testing in the front end where you need to, okay, but if the user does this, I need to block this, but also prompt this and tell them something so that they know that they're doing something that we don't want them to do.
So
And how do
basically,
you approach
to
that?
deal with invalid input
Yeah.
or
Yes.
preventing.
Yeah.
Right.
So I feel like Bas has an opinion about it because he's smiling and thinking about, all right, I've seen some stuff.
We recently had a request from business, like we have done search fields. Please put validation in that. So okay, we asked around, what kind of validation do we need? They say, yeah, put some validation in it. So we blocked just every special character that you can think of. We just blocked it. And then we released that, and then 2 weeks later, why is this blocked? We need this character. Okay, well, we remove that. 2 weeks later, why is this blocked again? Okay, we remove that as well. So you have 2 ways. You can or start whitelisting or start blacklisting items. And then it depends a little bit on how well the requirements are set from business or from the product owner or architect, that you know
Just
what.
your organization in general, yeah, exactly. And how does it feel for the backend actually? Because there was also like a small question related to the backend.
We have the exact same thing to deal with.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you have the interface, but a piece can fit and still contain wrong data. I mean, there's a lot of validation from the business that still can need to happen, like special characters, or the field has to be between specifically this and that, and this date cannot be before that date. And yeah, you write custom validators for that. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Martijn, as well for your question. Or is there any small remark?
Yeah, I think it's also good to keep talking to your product owner, because he or she should know, and if not, then he should know where to get that information. So yeah, don't make assumptions, and don't make assumptions on what the validation should be. Just ask it to somebody and make sure that that's the case, because I've seen it multiple times that people make assumptions on, it's a string. A string is always 500 characters long. And then, especially for that case, it was just 100 characters. So there were all kinds of weird errors flying around. So don't make assumptions on those validations. Just check with your product owner if that's are the sets of validations you need to have.
So what you're trying to say is that communication is key.
It's not the first communication. Yeah, I think
it's not about the programming; it's all about the communication.
This time we do not only agree, but even Vincent agrees with this as well. So
the communication is an issue.
I think our work is for 99% communication, and then the 1% of the time left, it's coding.
Yeah. Thank you. Also talking about assumptions. That's where we did the sketch in the beginning. Stereotypes. Those are also assumptions, right? So we should not assume you're only gaming in the basement. Maybe I'm doing that as well.
I don't have a basement.
Me neither, so that's okay. All right, thank you. I think looking time-wise, actually, we're almost running out of time. So this was the last statement. We will go to the questions and a small ending of this Frontend Lightning Talks. Because this was a talk show. I hope, please put in the chat if you like the talk show, because this is not the normal format we have. Usually we have like in-depth talks, but we like to do these in between. So feel free to just comment on what you think about the session, maybe some updates, etc. And we can improve as well. Or if you want to be on one of these sessions, that's also possible. Put it in the chat and we will contact you. Yes, I will skip through some slides.
Don't we?
Boom. We are looking ahead at 2023. Actually, we're organizing lots of meetups again in this format, as I mentioned, in the talk show format, but also the regular Frontend Lighting Talks, going back to you, from different companies as well. So not only the socialist people we have here right now, but also externals. So if you want to present a topic, that's possible. If you know a topic that you want to know more about, for instance, gRPC, we didn't talk about it today, but that's interesting for Frontend and Backend as well. Please mention it, and I will run for you and try to think about a speaker. So yeah, feel free to contact us. Also on the meetup page, just let us know what you think about it and visit the social website if you want to. If not, then it's also fine. Are there any questions left for the people here? I think I don't know if it's okay for online, should give an applause. At least, maybe, and maybe online applause as well. So, well done, guys. Finish the session again. Any leftover questions? You can unmute yourself, I think. You can unmute yourself and just ask a question that's not regulated. We will also stop the recording, I think. And then you can hang out for a bit. We will be here like 2 minutes. If there are no questions, we will also have a nice evening as well. Yes, thank you. Also, big shout out. You guys don't see him, but he is behind the camera. Maybe you want to go onto the screen, Joris, or